We are another month through 2025, so I'm here to talk about what I read this February. It was a great reading month for me because it's the month of Valentine's Day. I kind of leaned into the romance books a bit, and I ended up having my first 5-star read. And better yet, I ended up with 4 5-star reads this month. So let's get into it. First up, I read Blob, and this is actually the book that gave me that first 5-star read of the year. Blob follows Vi, who is getting out of a long-term relationship with her boyfriend. She doesn't really know what she wants to quite do with her life. She is kind of just going through the motions at this hotel front desk job. So after a drunken night out, she comes across the Blob. Now, you're going to kind of have an open mind about the Blob because we don't really find out what it is other than she can mold it into sentient things. So Vi decides to bring it back home and ends up molding it into a boyfriend. Okay? So as she's molding this Blob into a human-like form, she discovers it can watch TV and it can take instructions from her. It's kind of learning what it means to be like human, but that kind of backfires on her because it decides it wants kind of a life of its own. So the story alternates between what's happening with the Blob in the present and also going back. We learn a lot about Vi's upbringing, the struggles that she has gone through in her life, as well as her time with her ex. And, hopefully she strives to become a better person. So Blob is not a romance between her and this sentient being. I'm just gonna probably put it out there. It is definitely more of a contemporary fiction, but it's really humorous. And so I think if you enjoy Emily Austen's writing, I think you would enjoy Blob as well. I think some people won't like the ending. I really did enjoy the ending, and I really liked the points that it made throughout the book, especially in the end. And I really think that it offered a lot of hope as well. So 5 stars for me. Up next, we have the big one, Onyx Storm, which is the 3rd book in the Empyrean series, the first of which is Fourth Wing. So Onyx Storm follows Violet and the whole gang of people as they are trying to process what all happened at the end of Iron Flame. So no spoilers here. I'll admit that I listened to a lot of all 3 of these books on audiobook. I was really able to keep up with Fourth Wing very well and was really interested in what was happening there. Kind of fell off a little bit in Iron Flame. I don't know if I really remember everything that happened in that book. And so that kind of made me pretty confused when I got to Onyx Storm of trying to remember all of these side characters that are in the book as well. And let's be fair, all of these books are entirely too long. I think if I had done a reread of the first 2 books heading into this one, I may have enjoyed it and was able to understand what was happening a little bit better. But I really enjoyed a bit more of the humor from Riddick, and even from Xaden too. He is a much different character by this book as I feel like he was in Fourth Wing. So honestly, I probably need to reread all 3 of these books before continuing on in the series, but I'm kind of losing interest in this series as a whole. I gave it 4 stars. Honestly, it's probably more like a 3.5. Up next was the book I picked out of my TBR jar prompt, which was essentially just a hold that I'd had for a really long time with Libby. So I chose A Forever Interrupted by Taylor Jenkins Reid. So there are no books that make me cry probably as hard as the early Taylor Jenkins Reid books, like Did One True Love's first, After I Do, After That, and now Forever Interrupted. I have yet to get to Maybe in Another Life, but I definitely believe this will probably be read by the end of the year. I kind of want to hold off a little bit just so that I can anticipate it a bit more. So Forever Interrupted follows Elsie, who gets married to this guy named Ben. She's only known him for a few months, and about a week and a half after they get married, this isn't a spoiler, it happens in the first chapter, he ends up dying unexpectedly. And so this book goes back and forth through the past and the present as well. In the past, we're learning a lot about their relationship, how their love story unfolded from their meet cute all the way from, after they get married. And in the present, it's dealing with Elsie's grief as she tries to recover from this devastating loss of her husband, and also is meeting more of his family that she didn't know before he died. So this book is absolutely gut-wrenching, heartbreaking. I gave it 5 stars. Up next is Martyr, which I don't have a physical copy of. Now, this book is a coming-of-age story for Cyrus Shams, who was born in Tehran. He emigrates to America after his mother's death. He and his dad actually end up in Fort Wayne, Indiana, which is the city I was born in. How about that? So we learn a lot about his upbringing and his college experience. He drinks a lot there and ends up nearly drinking himself to death one night. And so he decides that's kind of his awakening. He needs to get sober. So we're following him through his sobriety. He's a writer and he decides that he wants to take on this project about writing about different kinds of martyrs. So this book started off really well for me. I physically read the first 40% or so, but then I had to take the book back to the library. So I had to pause for a little bit. I picked it back up on audio, and the middle of it was fine. I just wasn't quite as invested as I was in the beginning of the book. However, I did get much more reinvested once Cyrus decided to go to New York to follow this artist who's having an exhibit in a museum. But overall, I thought it was pretty interesting. I gave it 3.5 stars. In the days leading up to Valentine's Day, I read First Time Caller, which is the cutest book, especially to read right around Valentine's Day. It even talks about Valentine's Day in the book. Yeah, it's super cute. It gave me all the warm fuzzies. First Time Caller follows Aiden. He is a love talk show radio host in Baltimore. And this girl, Maya, calls in on behalf of her mother, Lucy, because she feels like she really needs to get back out and start dating again. Lucy gets on the phone. She ends up spilling all of what she wants in a relationship. Essentially, she wants the magic. She doesn't want a lukewarm relationship. She wants all the feels. Aiden is a bit pessimistic about love, but their interview together goes viral. So the radio show decides to bring Lucy in to act as kind of a co-host, and they decide to set her up on some dates. And so as Lucy gets paired up on some of these dates, she's getting to know Aiden a lot better. So like I said, I really enjoyed this book. Maya and her dad are a hoot. I really enjoyed each and every one of the characters. There's these little like tiny radio snippets between each chapter, which I really enjoyed. They kind of set things up. The romance feels like it actually moves at a pretty normal pace for a relationship. There's no like insta-love or moving way too slow. And there were times I was just like giddy, like wanted to kick my feet. If you didn't know, this book is the start of a new series for B.K. Borison. They're based on the Nora Ephron movies. So this one is based on Sleepless in Seattle, and it looks like a few of the characters are going to be a part of the next book. It's kind of a workplace rivalry, a la like You've Got Mail. So I'm definitely looking forward to that one. So when I originally rated this, I put it at 4.5 stars, but I now bump it up to a 5-star. Up next, we have Scythe and Sparrow, which is the third book of the Ruinous Love trilogy, which follows Butcher and Blackbird, Leather and Lark, and now this one. So I really enjoyed the first 2 books, even despite all of the gore and disgusting bits. This book follows a Fionn and Rose's love story. And I'll admit, I was kind of disappointed by this book. It was fine. It just feels like this relationship dealt more on the physical attraction between the 2 characters. Whereas especially the first one was like a friends, rivals to lovers, kind of slow burn romance. This one was out of the gates, hot and heavy. But what that did is that it kind of felt like there was very little plot between sex scene chapters, essentially. I would say what I enjoyed most about this book was actually the different scenes that had the friendship between all of the female characters who are in relationships with the Kane brothers. So I'm glad I finished the series, but I feel like this book could have definitely been stronger. I gave it 2.5 stars. Another book I don't have a physical copy of is Change of Heart, which is another Valentine's-ish kind of romance. Change of Heart follows Cam, who is a workaholic. She goes out on this blind date with a guy, totally blows him off because she's just not really interested. And this magical woman like intervenes and sends them both to this sort of Hallmark-esque small town where she gives them a few tasks that they need to do in order to get back to their real lives. So there's a magical realism aspect to this one. And to start out, Cam was kind of insufferable to me at times. She did get a little bit better as the book went on. And her love interest does seem really nice, but they had this weird thing where he kept calling her sweetheart, and they said it like an ungodly number of times. So it was cute. It's probably skippable, 3 stars. Up next is Rebel Witch, which is the sequel to Heartless Hunter. So this was the last book that I read of 2024, and I was very torn about it. I think I gave it 3.75 stars for a few different reasons. I love the setting. I really enjoy the witch/witch hunter aspect of it, but I feel like there was a lot missing of this book. I didn't feel like we really got to see Rue as like the Crimson Moth, and I think having a bit more of who she really was as the Crimson Moth would have been helpful. I thought there were just a few things that were just kind of ridiculous as far as the magic system, and I was not completely sold on the romance in this book. However, I was definitely sold on the romance in this book. And I feel like some of the things that bothered me about the first book were fixed in this book. So like, again, the setting, the vibes, super good. Both of these books are compulsively readable. Like, I keep wanting to know what's going to happen next. And so that's always a key thing for me. If I want to keep reading and I need to devour it, then I'm going to give it pretty good marks. This book had me laughing. It had me crying. I couldn't really anticipate what was going to happen. Aside from kind of that last big twist, I could kind of see that one coming. But like, both of the main characters are really clever, aren't they? So I don't want to say too much about either of these books because I don't want to spoil them for anybody, but I am fairly certain I will probably reread this duology at some point. 5 stars. And finally, for February, I read Nothing Serious, and I really enjoyed this book. But I feel like a lot of my enjoyment for this book is because I can relate a lot to the main character, and I feel like people who have different perspectives might not enjoy it as much. However, if you have read Blob, I think there's a fairly good chance you will also enjoy Nothing Serious. So the main character, Edie, she spends this book reckoning with the fact that her best friend, a guy named Peter, might not be the nice guy that she has always thought of him to be. When the two of them met in college, he ended up saving her from a sexual assault. So that fact has kind of guided how high of a pedestal she has put him on, and she has essentially been in love with him for their entire friendship. So Peter has been in a long-term relationship, so they had been just friends, but he and his girlfriend break up. He's newly single. Edie kind of thinks, okay, this might be my chance. But what she finds is that he's really eager to get onto the dating scene. Now, she's in her mid-30s and she struggles a ton with the dating apps as far as finding anyone who is attractive to her. Peter has the opposite experience. He's finding all of these women in their 20s and 30s who are attractive, smart, all at different life stages, all at different varying levels of success, and they're all attracted to him. So how much of this like bad behavior is Edie willing to tolerate in their friendship until she starts to look at him as not a very good person? So even though I really related to Edie a lot, there is a lot of things that she does in this book that I definitely don't condone and don't relate to at all. She did have some character growth, but I wish there would have been a little bit more. But the character growth that she had was probably pretty right on with what you would expect from her character. And this one was just compulsively readable as well. I really wanted to know what was going to happen with the overarching mystery, trying to figure out what happened to Peter's date. So between that and the really interesting feminist takes that are in this book, I really enjoyed it and I gave it 4.5 stars. So now that we're through what I read this February, let's go ahead and see how I did with my February TBR. So I'll admit, I didn't really set myself up for success very well in that I put 7 books on my TBR. I typically read around 9 per month, so that really only gave me 2 to play with. And as you can see, none of the sequels that I read are on this TBR, so I was really underestimating how much I was really going to want to pick up, like Scythe and Sparrow and Rebel Witch. So Frozen River, I was supposed to read for a book club. I did get about 20% into the book, and I kind of soft DNF'd it. I do think it's interesting. I would like to read it, but I just wasn't really feeling this type of historical fiction this month, so I put it down. Obviously, I read Blob, First Time Caller, Onyx Storm, and Forever Interrupted, which was one of my TBR jar picks. My January TBR jar pick was The Ministry of Time, and I never read it, so I pushed it to February. And as you can see, I also did not read it in February, so it was pushed to March. And Parable the Sower, definitely a book I want to read. I just didn't get to it this month. So with all that, I am putting 6 books on my TBR for March. And you will definitely see some of these books appear on my What I Read in March video. Can't wait to talk to you about those books. So please let me know in the comments what you read this February. And if you enjoy these videos, please feel free to subscribe, follow along. I am also at BookTripperPhyllis on Instagram and TikTok, so feel free to follow me over there as well. Thanks so much for watching. Have a good one.